to lead the uncomfortable conversations and turn them into teachable moments. Learn to break through your own discomfort to embrace the tensions and unknowns.
Thank you, Linda. So I'll be introducing our speakers today, and we're very fortunate to have with us today Karinda Roebuck and Michelle Wright, who are both part of the Chatham Organizing for Racial Equity, or CORE. Michelle Wright is a director of restorative practices and community healing, a trainer and consultant. And Karinda Roebuck is the CORE executive director. So they'll be telling us today about the work of their organization, and we're very happy to have you here. So it's all yours.
Good afternoon now. I was going to say good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to be here today. Thank you for having us. We are going to take some time to go over who we are as CORE. We'll talk about our mission, our vision, our values, and the work that we do across the state. And we'll start with a quick introduction. So he introduced me. My name is Michelle Wright, and I am the Director of Restorative Practice and Community Healing, which is a wonderful way of saying that I have the fantastic opportunity to do work that is reflective, that focuses on how we deal with the impact of racism in our bodies, how it affects us mentally, emotionally, and physically. And we have a lot of information about who we are, right? I could tell you about where I went to school, but those things are not the most important introductions for who I am. So I will say that I am a daughter, I am a sister, I am a granddaughter, a cousin, a good friend, I think. And I grew up in rural North Carolina, so I am a farm girl. I'm about good food, I'm about family, I'm about faith, and all of these things are with me, walking with me all the time, as I go forward to do work that I think is valuable and important to me. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking specifically about I had a great grandmother, y'all. She was 104 when she passed, just 2 years ago now. And I am very much her great granddaughter. She is a huge part of who I am, why I do what I do, and what continues to encourage me to do work in community, because she was community.
And I told Chris, I'm sorry, y'all, I don't stand behind podiums. I'm gonna try, but I like to talk and walk. I'm Karinda Roebuck. I call myself the steward of a community governed organization. I'm executive director. A lot of what we do at CORE is really about finding and investing in leaders in our community to take ownership of an organization, right? And we'll get into that a little bit later. I can give you my title, you see it, I can give you all of my degrees, all of my stuff that I've done. My parents will laugh at me and share in the laughter of all of the many degrees and educational opportunities I've had. Professional student is one, probably. I am a child of immigrants. I am, English is my second language. I'm a mother, I'm a midwife, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, right? I'm a gardener. I love herbalism, medicinal herbalism. You'll find me with my hands in the dirt or walking in the woods. So often we introduce ourselves, especially living in Chapel Hill and Durham and Raleigh, with our titles, with our degrees. And what's so important to us when we're in community with each other is looking beyond those hierarchies that are established, those social categories. And it's about really connecting as humans, which is why we were really intrigued and honored to actually be invited to come here today. So thank you for having us today. I do want to make a quick note. We used to be called Chatham Organizing for Racial Equity, and we ended up doing a lot of work now across the state. I've actually been asked and invited to do some work with Duke's Center for Child and Family Health. And we've had the honor and privilege to do some work in different counties which prompted a name change because we've been asked to bring our model to different counties. And we're like, well, how are we going to do this when we're Chatham? And well, New Hanover was interested in our work. We're like, maybe we should consider a name change. So now we are community organizing for racial equity. This happened last year, early last year, maybe the year before. I don't know. Time post-COVID, y'all know that, right? Yeah, yeah. Let me do this one. Okay. So we're gonna let me just be very transparent. We're transparent facilitators. You'll see us talking to each other. We try to keep it real for y'all. And full transparency, we had an 8-hour board retreat yesterday. So if we sit down, thank you for the chairs. I do appreciate it. It's because we had an 8-hour board retreat yesterday. And this is actually timely because we like to review our mission, our vision, and our values at each of our board retreats. And what's really great for us is to stop and think, how are we operating? How are we showing up? And so much of our work in the community is making sure that we're leading with our values. And we'll get into our values here in a minute, but our mission at CORE, right? We envision strong communities rooted in their collective power, liberating themselves and transforming institutions for racial equity. Right? Our mission is to create a culture of equity by building stronger communities. It's not my work alone. It's not Michelle's work alone. It's our collective work to do this. Right? We do this through education, through healing, and through community organizing.
And these are our values. So at the heart of who we are community organizers. We're not just consultants. We are doing community-based work that is founded on relationships. We value equity, diversity, nourishment, relational power, relational organizing, and cooperation. We value transparency, the power of transformation. Oh, yes. You want me to start over? Okay, I can. Okay, so our values, we are community organizers. We value equity, diversity, nourishment, relational power, relational organizing, and cooperation. We value transparency, the power of transformation, and collective accountability. So this is an overview of what these things mean to us. When we talk about equity, we're talking about being accountable to applying an equity lens to all governance, all of the way we function. So we don't feel like we are staying true to ourselves if we are not applying an equitable lens in every situation. Diversity is a representation of the community that we serve, consisting of culturally and racially diverse individuals. We work really hard to ensure that 51% of our board membership will be Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. We understand that not only is it important for us to have a diverse representation, but when you're at the table, do you have a voice? Do you have power? Do we understand the power dynamics that are at play when we are participating in decision-making and governance of an organization? We believe in nourishment, an inclusive and stimulating environment that facilitates personal and collective learning and growth. So we understand the value, especially in doing racial equity work, that you have to have nourishment. You have to be supportive. I feel like I want to jump ahead so bad. The way that we think about our work at CORE is about, this is really hard for me. I didn't realize that I never hold a mic. I'm normally just loudly speaking. We work really hard at CORE to go through this process of awareness, of healing, and organizing. And so when we talk about nourishment, it is because we have a very thorough understanding of how we need to have space for healing, reflection, and support when you are engaging in work that can be difficult and uncomfortable and things that can be emotionally triggering for you. Relational as a value. Everything that we do is centered on relationship building. If any of you may be familiar with the wonderful Kim Pevia, she says that relationships are built at the speed of trust. We take a slow process of working with people. It's not about, hey, how you doing? Can you come do this? And I'll see you there and I'll put you down for next week. I want to know what's important to you, why it's important to you. I want to know how we can support one another. I want to know what your needs are and how I can support you in that. And I want to be able to share in your joys the way that you guys shared, as well as your concerns. Transparency. CORE's board stays true to mission and values in decision making, and we try to provide a good flow of information. We are accountable to the community. When we talk about being community governed, which we will soon, we are not accountable just to our board. We're not just accountable to funders. We are accountable to the people who we are serving. So if I am serving the community of Chatham County, I have to be willing to get up and share with you what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, where the money is coming from and how it's flowing, what you should expect to see. And when we engage with people, we give back. So it's not just about extracting information, looking for data and to be able to push through programs. It's about, is this what you need? Is it working? And now that we've gotten information from you, what are we going to do with it? We want you to know. And we want you to know where it's going and what you should expect to see from us, because we're coming back. I feel like I don't want to read all these to you. Cooperation, support and champions work with the broader community. We believe in transformation and accountability, which I've kind of touched on already. We truly believe that we are able to see change and that it can be transformative change. When we talk about dismantling racist systems, oppressive systems, that is transformative work. I like to talk about my future potential hypothetical babies. And I believe in transformative work because I want there to be a future that is very different from the life that I have had thus far when it comes to experiences with race and oppression and working through different systems.
What's really unique and important for us is that value of nourishment. I'm going to go back to that real quickly for you guys. Michelle talked about this. How often do you guys get surveys in the mail and they're asking you for information? And how many of y'all actually know what's being done with those survey results, right? We're constantly getting extracted information from us as consumers, as community members. But how do I know that my information is actually being used to drive strategic visioning or program design or fill in the blank, right? How do I know that change is actually happening? And so often you think about interns come and some nonprofits are like, okay, what can I get out of this intern? And for us with nourishment, when I talk about community governance, I'm finding community leaders, organic leaders that exist in the community, giving them leadership development skills, training them in racial equity and community organizing skills. I am nourishing our community. I'm investing in the community, same way I would with an intern who comes. I'm making sure they're leaving with racial equity training. I'm making sure they understand the principles of community organizing and what it means to be community governed, right? How can we actually shift our model to center those who are most impacted, to raise and elevate those voices who have been historically excluded or silenced? So much of our work is about relational organizing. It's relationship based. And it's more than my degrees and my title. It's who I am as a person and my entire authentic self. I come to you today as a mom, as a child of immigrants, where English is my second language. Right? I come to you fully as that person and not fragmented. And we're very intentional about making sure there's space in our community, in the spaces that we hold, where you can come and bring your full authentic self. Community governance is it's a challenge, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. It's been hard trying to get aboard in a traditional nonprofit sector. When you think about the structure, you have a board, you have an ED, you might have some directors, you might have some staff, some volunteers, and then there's community here at the bottom of this hypothetical triangle, right? We have this triangle of structure. When we talk about community governance, we're shifting from this board governance, which is looking at the mission overall, maybe helping with strategic planning and visioning. We're actually shifting that from the board to the community that we serve. So we're shifting power and changing the structures of a traditional nonprofit organization so that we can be community-led. And we do that through this idea of nourishment. We have to build leaders. We have to build the capacity. We have to let individual, everyday community folks recognize that they themselves hold power and that it actually can be used together to make change. And the change that we work towards for racial equity is systemic change. We can talk about the interpersonal racist acts that happen, but what we know underlying all of this is that there's some other things that are going on that may not be immediately above surface that we don't see. And we have to what is going on here? How do we actually solve and find solutions to these? We build leaders in our community to do this. And so we've moved into this community governance model and moving into, want me to do this one? You want to do the next one? Let me start and then see what's up. Okay. When we're asked to come and speak to people, we used to draw this out all the time. So we finally said, okay, we need a graphic. And this isn't the true full, this is me on Canva, y'all. Thank God for Canva, I have to say. At the heart of everything we do, we hold community at the center and at the heart. And when I say I hold community, Michelle talks about working with community, we also recognize that we are also a part of that community too. So I live and work in Chatham. Michelle works in Chatham. She used to work for Chatham Health Department as well. So operating in spaces, making sure that people who are in this community live and operate and play in these communities, right? So there's no us and them, it's a we. When folks come in to volunteer, they're like, well, you should. I'm like, no, we should. And our board says that, oh, well, you should. I'm like, no, we should. It's a we, it's ours. So often we think of things as a linear process. This is our theory of change, our pedagogy. Education, healing into organizing. We believe that we have to build awareness, right? Develop a shared language in education, move into this space of, oh, wow, now I have this information. What do I do with it? And it's kind of troubling. I'm feeling this discomfort that you shared earlier in those opening words. And if I'm hurting, my inclination is take some ibuprofen and call it a day, right? Or go soak in some Epsom salt and call it a day. When actually, I should actually sit still and be like, okay, what's really hurting? What is going on? How do I address this? How do I do this work? Because sometimes you might be exposed to the problem and you want to solve it. And I'm like, okay, what can I do? Right? What can I do immediately? When in fact, we need to stop and reflect and start to practice being in community with each other to heal, practice conversations across racial divides, simply just being together before we can begin to act and organize. And it's not a linear process. It's not one directional. It's a multi-directional continuum. And so about core, our 3 areas are broken down into 3 program areas loosely. And it's so hard for us to talk about it in 3 separate areas because they're so interconnected. Right? Our education, we have community conversations. We have one coming up next week, the 12th, on climate justice. We have, Chatham County has one of the top 5 in the nation of PFAS contamination in our water, which affects all of Chatham County if you're in the watershed of the Haw River. So we're having climate justice. We had a conversation last year. We're continuing at part 2. And actually there's organizers who are working on this issue. So our education is, you see it's a little overlap between organizers need to understand the issue. So we're bringing in some community education. We come together for community conversations, lectures, workshops, all that stuff. Into healing, which is Michelle's Restoration Villages, which she will go into a little bit later. And then we move into community organizing. And we'll give you a little bit more in depth here.
So our education is all about learning together, and we like to talk about building learning communities. So communities where we are shifting from the person who is the lecturer being the only expert in the room. Yes, you are here to learn and engage in content, but we also trust that whoever is coming into the room, you are also the expert in your lived experience. And so we like for our learning communities to be a space where not only are you receiving information, but you are able to share and engage with the content in a way that respects your experience. And we talk about how it may align and sometimes it doesn't. And what do we do in those moments of growth and exchange? We spend a lot of time in our education spaces talking about perspective, talking about how we believe in the both and. Yes, this is your experience. And it doesn't negate that someone else has a different experience, possibly even interacting with the same system, same person, or same place. I I was told this maybe sometime in undergrad that just because someone is a hero in your story doesn't mean they're not the villain in someone else's. And that has always stuck with me about being willing to understand that there are multiple perspectives around one person, around experiences, systems, and all the things that we talk about.
Yeah. This is completely facilitating transparency here. When you were speaking about Reverend Barber, right? When we're talking about the humanity, so often we think about Martin Luther King. I heard a story recently about him where he actually chose not to go to a protest and people were aghast. Oh my God, Luther King didn't go. He didn't go because he was scared he was going to get killed and got killed actually a month later. He was scared. And so often we put people on these pedestals as experts and as these martyrs without recognizing their humanity. He was scared, and that's okay. That's okay to live in those experiences. That's okay to bring that to the room and to that space as we're learning how to learn. Sorry, that's it.
No, I actually think that's a perfect segue. Maybe I'll save it for the organizing slide.
Both educational opportunities for community and for institutions. So we offer free workshops across the state. Sorry, that's just my mic. I got it. We do both education for institutions as well as for community. We do workshops. We're in spaces. We're in government agencies. We're in institutions, nonprofits. Right now, we're doing some work on trauma-informed communities project through the Department of Health and Human Services and Duke Center for Child and Family Health, and we're doing that across 51 counties. So sometimes you'll see us in spaces and you'll see us doing workshops, but all of our events on the community side, for the most part, are free for folks to come and join.
So this is my jam, y'all. Restoration Villages. Our Restoration Village arm, and really all of CORE, we are centered in this idea of liberation. And liberation being not just this physical freedom, but also this freedom from how oppressive systems fragment us, how they separate us from things that we understand to be good and right and just, how it requires you to commit yourself to ideas that may not even belong to you, ideas that may even harm you, the way that we internalize norms around attitudes, around what is beautiful, around what is good, right? In our restoration villages, we have a collective space called the Social Justice Exchange. At the Social Justice Exchange, it is a gathering of people, and I always believe in serving food because I believe talking about things and coming together requires food. So if you decide to join us, you will get a hot meal. The Social Justice Exchange is a collective gathering of people where we are having lightly facilitated discussions and we are talking about things that are presently going on in the world. We're talking about race, we're talking about equity, and we're talking about how this is impacting us collectively, how we are showing up and where we're struggling to show up for ourselves and for other people. And then we have our race affinity spaces. These spaces are broken into how you self-identify racially And we break into these groups because there are times when we are working together collectively where ownership on understanding and dealing with racism is put on people of color to explain, to share their stories as a learning, as a opportunity for learning. And while that's okay, it can be burdensome. There are times when we need to break out into our groups so that when we are struggling with information, experiences, that people can help you who are in different places on their journeys, and also to relieve some of that burden and also allow you to speak freely. We can recognize that when we get into positions of discomfort, it can make us feel like I'd rather not say that than have somebody look at me crazy. And so we allow these spaces so that hopefully you can feel supported, you can have a sense of comfort, and you have the ability to share a little bit more openly and prepare yourself when you're ready to come back into the collective group. We do these each month and they alternate each month. So we'll have a social justice exchange, and then the next month we'll have race affinity spaces. And then we have our community connections. We recently had a spades competition for Black History Month, and it was wonderful. Um, we had a little bit of, I'm not going to call it conflict, but I don't know if you all are familiar with the game of spades. When I play spades, sometimes the order of the trump cards are big joker, little joker, deuce of diamonds, and deuce of spades. Other people do not play that way, and it came up. But since I am a part of the coordinating team, those were the rules. But we host our community connection events because we firmly believe at core that we are not just a sum total of our trauma. We spend a lot of time doing the work and learning race equity concepts. We are talking about hard things, and it can feel overwhelming. It can feel like this is all that we have. And the truth is, as much as I have been impacted by racism, by oppression, by different things in this world, I have also very much had joy. I have had laughter. I have had family, and I am loved. And so we believe that it is important for us to provide community connection events because we have to bring people in love, in joy, in laughter, and allow for that. Because if we are only doing traumatic work, that burnout is very, very real. Oh, Juneteenth.
One of our big community connections is our Juneteenth celebration. We're actually hosting our 7th annual Juneteenth. When it became a federal holiday a couple of years ago, we kind of found ourselves in a pickle because everybody with bigger budgets started to host Juneteenth events. So we were thinking to ourselves, how can we actually shift and change that we're doing something unique and different? And we chose to make our annual Juneteenth event a Black Arts Festival. So we really try to showcase Black artists, performers, and Black businesses. So our annual one's coming up June, that Saturday before Juneteenth. Sorry, 15th, there we go. And what's really great is that we actually do a lot of youth work too with the North Carolina Arts Council, as well as the Chatham Arts Council has helped us really do this work. I know we did have over 3,000 people last year, and it's actually held at, you may not, this is really great North Carolina history, the last African-American owned and operated fair association in the nation is in Chatham County. I was pretty thrilled to see that. So we're trying to help that organization hold on to their land and also get some renovations and continue to thrive. All of our artwork and our poster artwork are done by youth. So we have a poster art competition in which youth submit art and are able to really explore what this looks like, what this means, get exposure. And it's really great. And tomorrow, actually, we're launching a talent show, a talent search. So if you know of any artists who would like to perform, they just have to submit a 30-second clip video. And the first prize, I think, is $500 and an interview with an Atlanta-based producer. And some other things. I know I have the sheet at home, sorry, but I'll plug it later. But this is a great opportunity. It started off as just purely educational, and then it became, hey, we want to celebrate, we want to have fun. And what's really great about this is it's a prime example of community governance. We have a Juneteenth planning team and a planning committee. There are people from the community, and they decide what we're doing. I'm the bean counter, as I say. And I'm like, I'm the bean counter. Here's your budget. Let's talk about this. And I signed contracts, but they design it all. They decide it all, the planning, the everything. We provide them with the resources that they need. And it's been great. And it's been successful, highly successful. This is this year's, yep, that's the artwork this year. The theme this year is freedom to dream. And the student thought, Black women need the freedom to dream and think beyond being caregivers, and the one that's always holding up the family, and they can dream to be whatever they need to be. She was way more eloquent in her description than I just was, but yeah. And then we come to community organizing. When we talk about our work at CORE, this is who we are. We are community organizers. We are building broad-based membership organization of community organizers. When we talk about broad-based, that's community members, individuals, faith institutions, groups. And when we talk about a group, a community group, it's loosely defined. It's not, it doesn't have to be a formalized group. I have a group of dads who like to play soccer in Chatham County. They want to join. They're just a bunch of pickup games. That's it. But they want to join collectively as a group. This is not meant to be exclusive. It's meant to be inclusive. And how can we actually help and create spaces and be the container for spaces where people may not otherwise feel safe? If you're not familiar with Chatham County, our biggest town is Siler City. And actually Siler City is more than half Hispanic. And a predominant number of those are undocumented. And so when we talk about building a broad-based membership organization, typically we're organizing institutions or we're organizing groups. But when you have people without documentation, they do not have necessarily groups at which they can actually be a part of. So we had to keep it very loosely defined and then actually include the individuals as well into the organizing. We have pledges and we're launching membership come fall. And what comes with membership is free community organizing training, access to racial equity training, and actually working on campaigns that are issue-based, that matter to you. And yes, so what is community organizing 101? Do you want to give your spiel? Yeah.
Yes, but I had a thought. So we're going to talk about what community organizing is. And one of my favorite things that I recently heard about community organizing, we use the language of shifting power. So a lot of times when we think about community work, there's this emphasis on empowering people, and shifting power is being able to honor the power within somebody else. And because I recognize it and see it and I don't question it, it allows you to use it and not be constricted. And I think that's super important because a lot of times when we are doing organized work, we have a process, and that process can be a little bit rigid about how people are supposed to speak, to vote, to show up. And when we are talking about things like shifting power, it comes back to that thing of come as you are, or I will meet you where you are at. And it means that whether or not you have an educational background, whether or not you have a lot of money, or you are in a position that is considered one of influence, that doesn't determine whether or not you have the power to impact change in your community, in your family, or wherever you are. And I think that's really critical to how we function in community organizing. I'm gonna hold on to it. Okay, so organizing in communities, we focus again on developing relationships. So we create spaces where we are able to have conversation. And again, we start these conversations out with who you are, not just asking about your resources, not just asking about what you have to offer to us, but who you are, what's important to you, what are you interested in? Because if we have similar values, whether we look alike, whether we think alike, if you value children being safe, then we can have a conversation. If you value people being treated fairly, being treated well, if you value these things, all those other points of separation kind of fall away. So we focus on building relationship and building trusting relationships around what we believe in as people, understanding the power that you hold. Now, this comes next, where we are asking you about how you see yourself in your community. And when we think about power and even access to resources, I always think about two people in my community who I think are about to become a running story. Um, I grew up, y'all familiar with Bladen County, anybody? No, okay. Okay. It is far. So it is a rural community. And when I tell you, I think we had the record for the smallest Walmart that was left in the nation. Seriously. And it still has not been converted to a super Walmart. It's just holding on. Um, but in my community, there's a woman and her name is Miss Ika. Miss Ika runs a daycare. She has 7 beautiful children. Her and her husband are wonderful people. And Miss Ika is the person in the community that when we wanted to go somewhere, she made it happen. So if you wanted to go to Myrtle Beach, she'd take you to Myrtle Beach. When we wanted to go to DC to see monuments, she got children and parents and people to take you to DC to see the monuments. If you want to go, she does really big trips now. She's been going to Italy and all types of places. But growing up, she was a person who, if the people in the community wanted something to happen, Miss Ika would pull it together. She's a community organizer. Now, my grandma, she was not organizing trips, but she watched everybody's child whenever they needed her to. She has a house on the corner of this area called Newtown, and everybody knows Miss Mayola. And if you needed something, you needed food, even if you needed a couple of dollars, if she had it, she would give it to you, and you knew she wasn't going to get on you about giving it back. She's a community organizer. Your influence is not rooted just in what you have access to in the normal ideas of what is powerful, but being a person who people trust, that's a resource. That's an access point. Being a person who is connected to other people, that's power. And as we talk about organizing in communities, we're talking about coming together in our power, learning together, healing together, and then taking that collective action. Because now that I trust you and I can work with you, we can do anything. I can trust you to show up at the Board of Education meeting and that we're going to be on the same page with what we're working towards.
When we talk about community organizing, it's a process. So many people think it's like, is it a workshop? But it's a training. It's actually just simply a process of people coming together, and they're coming together around those shared values, around a shared interest, working on a common agenda where we're able to act together, right? When we get down to the root of our values and our interests, then all that other stuff, like Michelle talked about, can be put aside. This is a process of relationship building. I can talk to you guys all day long about relational organizing. Guess what the key word today is? Relationships, right? It's about relationship and collaboration. Is it easy? No. Is it quick? No. It's slow work. Right? And we talked about, and she says this, it's about shifting and building power within communities. When I say I'm empowering somebody, that's assuming that I have all the power. And I recognize that Michelle has power. I recognize that you and you individually have power. It's not about me giving you power. It's helping you to recognize and realize your own power. When we say this, we used to call this what community organizing is not, right? Meaning it's not just. Advocacy is when you're speaking on behalf of others. And I talk about advocacy work as a Band-Aid work. And we need Band-Aids, so don't get me wrong here, right? I'm a midwife. When I think about a hemorrhage, I'm calling for immediate help, right? If somebody's bleeding out, I'm going to call for immediate help. That's mobilizing. That's moving people quickly to solve an immediate action that needs to be done now, right? Is that solving the root problem of the bleed? No, it's not, right? I need a bandage. That's advocacy. I still need that Band-Aid because that woman is bleeding right there. I need to put that bandage on there, maybe apply some pressure, right? Community organizing is when we start thinking about, okay, I need to find that vein and cauterize it. And why did she bleed to begin with? Right? What is that root cause? When you go to the hospital, you go to the doctor, you might get some medicine to treat your symptoms, but you're looking at that etiology underneath. What's the underlying cause of those symptoms? And how can we shift and change in that thinking? So community organizing is not just these things, it's all of them. And it's based upon the community interests of what they want to move for. And we're going to leave you with this one here. Relational organizing. So quickly, we want to do things together and do action, but it requires racial healing and liberation before action. It requires relationship building. Thanks, guys. I guess we'll hold these if you guys have any questions, any comments.
So before we take questions, our society is an all-volunteer organization. We receive no money from any other organization. We survive due to your commitment to our common goals, that together we can continue to provide a place where ethics and shaping a more caring and thoughtful world is our ultimate concern. So we pass the basket and thank you all for your generous donations. And while the baskets are going around, we'll open up things for questions. So, you know, the usual routine, raise your hand to ask a question. Don't ask a second question until everybody has had a chance to ask their first question. And the first hand up is in the back there. And who is going to take the mic around? There you are. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, for my question? I'm a concrete thinker, and I was wondering if you could give me a real life example of the kinds of things that you do.
Yeah. So real life example, education, we have workshops. So coming up, actually, next Saturday, we have our racial equity fundamentals workshop, where we really begin to build a shared language. Discuss what power is. Start talking about basic principles of community organizing. You'd be surprised how many people still use equity and equality interchangeably, and there's differences in those definitions, and having them to really understand what we're talking about. And it's not just like our theory of change is not just about education. We talk about, okay, now you've just had this veil removed almost. You had some education. How do we begin to engage in more learning and becoming a learning community? Well, we want you to come to our restoration villages and engage in conversation and dialogue, right? Come to our community connections. Practice being in community across racial divides, right? That's our spades competition. We have a movie night. We have Juneteenth. And then folks inevitably are always here because they want to be community organizers. So become a member. Let's get trained as a community organizer. The formalized training of community organizing, we've actually partnered with IAF, which is Industrial Areas Foundation, may or may not be familiar with them. But they're helping us provide the formalized community organizing training. And that includes taking down problems, because we all got problems. We can say problems, right? But how do we take those problems, those big things of capitalism, right? How about living wage? Let's break it down a little bit. Because we're not going to solve capitalism right now. Let's break it down into, okay, livable wage. Well, then let's break down these issues a little bit further into affordable housing. Well, what's the fair market value? Right? It helps them to think and to understand how to literally break down these issues into winnable issues. How to host a house meeting, how to have relational meetings with folks to talk about what's your common interests, what are your values, what's your why, right? Why do you do what you do in the community? So those are some concrete things that we do. We do a lot of educational training and institutions as well to talk about redefining community engagement when the community is ready and has built power. What does it mean to shift power now to community?
And I think I'll use an example from my time at the health department. So when we think about how education can shift systems, when we think about hiring processes, there's typically a hiring process. There's people who are on a panel to bring in new candidates, and you think about how you advertise for a job, right? So information around race, equity, access to information, and how we value education versus lived experience in a hiring panel results in a different list of candidates. So I worked at a place where we were only submitting our job posting to maybe 1 or 2 websites, and there was a high priority on reaching out to UNC Chapel Hill because there were a lot of graduates from there. North Carolina has the most historically Black colleges and universities in the US as a state. Why are we not sharing postings with HBCUs in the state? Then asking yourself, once you share those postings with those candidates and you have your hiring panel and you start talking about likability and good fit, how does implicit bias impact what you like? How does it impact who you are determining to be a good fit? And so when you're able to have those dialogues in an institution, you see a shift in the diversity of your candidates. And you can also see a shift in who is making it to second round interviews and who's being hired. And through our race affinity spaces, being able to have institutions be willing to host race affinity spaces. We have not, everybody is not completely on board with that, but being able to have spaces in the workplace where people are able to talk about things that have caused discomfort. When we start thinking about the real world impact of somebody tone policing. So people of color being considered to be very aggressive when they're sharing an opinion or they're feeling impassioned, and being able to have dialogue and then allowing that dialogue to influence policy and accountability in the institution, I think are some of the best real world examples.
Okay, ready? Given the number of people that want to ask questions, I'll be very brief and suggest a short answer. What was Martin Luther King so afraid of, and how did the water get so polluted?
What was Martin Luther King so afraid of? Yeah, right, yeah. No, yeah. When I gave that example, I was thinking of when she's talking about Reverend Barber having all these bodyguards around him. He used to not. He used to walk around in community all the time. When you become this figurehead and you become
I mean, what conference or meeting was it afraid to go to?
It was a protest. It was another student sit-in in Alabama, and but it was in the southern part of the state. And I can pull that up and actually share it with Chris so he can share it with you as well. But it was a team of students who were organizing to go and stage a sit-in in southern Alabama, and he was getting enough death threats that he knew he did not want to go at that time. He was scared.
Quick question. You work in Siler City. Do you work with the El Vínculo Hispano?
So,
And
yeah, very closely.
Ilana?
Yeah, with
Yeah.
Ilana, Selena Lopez is their
Selena.
youth director of their program, their youth program. That youth program, y'all, is amazing. Amazing, absolutely amazing. And those students that come through that program recognize, despite the barriers and the constant barriers, they are thriving. They are really thriving under her tutelage. Yes, so community partnership is really important to us. They come to a lot of our community organizing things. They're trying to work with us. Recently, there was a lot of illegal checkpoints that were being put up by the town police throughout Siler City and places like outside of Hispanic churches during service and around one elementary school that's predominantly Hispanic, where parents were contacting us about getting dismissed from care from Piedmont Health Services because people couldn't get to their appointments, as well as their kids were getting detention because of all the tardies because they all had to walk at this point. So we helped them organize around and come up with some strategies around how to mitigate this and ultimately stop them.
I've been trying to think of how to ask this question. So I lived in North Carolina now for 40 years, and so I've seen a lot of change. And I have recently been to Holly Springs a few times, and that's just becoming an exurb. And Pittsboro has this huge Chatham Park under development, and I think is increasingly becoming an exurb. So is that an opportunity or is that a challenge? Are you guys planning in any way for this big influx of new people?
I have lots of thoughts. In a nutshell, it's really interesting that you say that. First, I want to say, you were trying to think of how to say this. One of our favorite phrases that we say in our workshops, give yourself the grace and courtesy to speak in rough draft, especially when we're talking about racial equity. Sometimes we may not always hold the words. We may not be eloquent in our speech, but we just need to get it out, right? We feel it in our gut and we need to get it out in some way. It's fine. Give yourself that grace and courtesy. And I hope you do the same for me. All right. Chatham Park. Yeah, that's huge. What's really interesting is taking down a problem like Chatham Park, right? It's here, it's happening. We've been expecting it for 20, 30 years now, and it's finally coming. We recognize that Pittsboro and North Chatham is going to become Holly Springs and Apex. And what you hear in our systems, like our educational system, Chamber of Commerce, is, oh, we're so excited and what's to come and all these people that's coming. And then core on our end, on the flip side, is what about the people who are here? What about the people who are here and are getting forgotten? And so that's the organizing work that we do. So yes, we're very cognizant and very much following what's happening with Wolf Speed. I mean, between Wolf Speed, which is Randolph County over there by the zoo, where the zoo at, right? And then VinFast, which is in Moncure over there by almost near Sharon Harris. When they first got a permit, it was really just for a small factory, and every few months notice now all of a sudden it's just expanding, and they're getting more and more right of way onto people's properties who have historically been there for generations and are now getting forgotten. And Chatham County is very divisive in racial relations and having conversations. We used to have a Confederate statue in front of our courthouse. And what we find, people are coming together now across racial divides about our family's been on this land for generations and now we're getting pushed out. And things like gentrification and rapid gentrification that happens where people can't afford property taxes anymore. If we were to remove North Chatham and Pittsboro from the equation, the median income in Chatham County would be about $29,000. But because North Chatham and Pittsboro are there, the median income is about 62, which is huge, right? So there's always a tale of two, maybe 3, 4 Chathams, right? So it's a large county land-wise, and a lot of divide. Yeah.
I'm assuming that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a core part of your work. And there seems to be a pushback on DEI these days, to the extent that some corporations are either dropping their programs or the legislature certainly is up against it. So has that affected your work?
Very much. There's actually a new state law that went into effect December 1st, in which we can no longer train state employees on concepts of, gosh, I can give you the whole thing. So when I do train state employees now, I say, I am not allowed to tell you. I am not allowed to tell you that this country was built on the backs of African slaves, indigenous people, and indentured servants. I'm not allowed to tell you that, right? So I'm not allowed to teach certain concepts about privilege and power. I'm not allowed to say that the first school in New England was created for white male landowning children, male children. I'm not allowed to say those things to you. We are definitely seeing the effects of this. Our institutional education is about 60% of our revenue. This time last year, we were almost signed in contracts to fit that our goal. This year, we're about 40% behind. So we're seeing a significant impact.
I'm interested in attending some of your things going on, but I'd like to know how I could get that information. And do you have, should we pull up your website or tell us more about how to get information to us that want to start going to what you're offering?
So we do have a main website, corenc.org, and Karinda is getting ready to pull the website up. But we also share our events on a platform called Mobilize. Once you sign up for the event on Mobilize, it will continue to tell you about new and upcoming events. And every event that we are having, whether it's our restoration villages or our workshops in community education, each one of those are on Mobilize, and it will share of course, all the basic logistical information. It will give you an overview of the event, and it'll send you a reminder days before and the day of, because I need those myself.
Google Mobilize?
Yes, there's a, we can pull it up. Oh, there's mobilize.com, and you can find core NC.
Oh, yeah.
And if it's also easier, we're gonna pull it up, but Chris, if we send it to you, okay. So we're gonna pull it up, and we'll also send it via email.
Okay, if you have a QR code scanner, if you can get that up, I did do that. I scanned your QR code and that comes up. My concern recently has been our legislature is siphoning so much money out of the public education budget for private school education. And I'm wondering if you're seeing that impact in Chatham County or in any of the communities that you serve.
Yeah, definitely. We have a contingency in Public School Strong in Chatham County. Public School Strong is a toolkit, if you're not familiar with it, based out of Race Forward is a national organization, racial equity organization. And Public School Strong is this toolkit and chapter that are offering to smaller groups, community groups, to be able to implement strategies and organize around public school support. This Parent Bill of Rights and this new law, December 1st, is actually, you can go to the Moms for Liberty website and literally print off the playbook. There is that anybody can follow. And they're pretty much following the playbook that much of Alabama, Tennessee, Iowa, and Florida have engaged. So we know what's coming. Part of community organizing, what's so important, mobilizing work, like going on protests, those are very reactive. They're not necessarily going to have some systemic change. It might have a policy change, but we know this, right? Drucker, if you guys are familiar with his phrase of culture strategy, or eats your policy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? So you can create all the policies you want. The challenge, however, is if the culture of your organization or the culture of your community is one that's not going to honor it, then that's just a wonderful waste of time and energy that you put in creating these policies. Organizing is about being proactive. So this Public School Strong initiatives are about how can we be proactive and stay on top of this Moms for Liberty playbook, and stay on top of these issues that are coming through legislation or even combating it before it passes. One of the challenges of being an organization that funding is at a whim to legislation, whoever is in power and in control at that time. We're seeing evidence of it at UNC, significant evidence right now at UNC with funding possibly being restricted. So yes, it's a significant issue.
I need to make sure I'm on, because I'm a double. I'm double questioning now. Pre-pandemic, we had a presentation, this was maybe 5 or 7 years ago now, from an organization from Roxborough called Basics. And it was faith-led, white and black churches getting together because they had had a lot of divisiveness. And Solomon and I and Christina went to a couple of things. Problem is Roxborough's Roxborough. I don't live anywhere near Roxborough.
Right.
So I thought it was very interesting because it sounds very much like your events where you have mixed, and I wondered if you had ever heard of them or reached out to them because they're still around. I still get emails from them.
I don't know them, and I will say that community organizing work, racial equity work, we need multiple organizations doing this work, right? And I love partnerships, and that's mostly why we create things like our Juneteenth event and community connections events to really practice collaboration around practicing around lighthearted issues, right? Like, oh, let's get together and have a celebration. Let's get together and have a movie night. And then now we need to get together and work on checkpoints that are happening in Siler City, right? Like this is opportunity. So any chance we have to connect with any organization. There's Justice United here in Orange County. Durham Can in Durham is one organization. One Wake is in Wake County. They do a lot of work on community organizing initiatives and around affordable.
Do they also do work just about the conversation?
No.
I mean, that's what
Yeah.
Roxborough really.
Yeah.
about.
What we found, the biggest interest in doing it from the education, the healing and the conversations into the action. And we firmly believe that that is the entire theory of change. And it can't operate in one alone. It has to be a continuum to really do that work. Yeah.
You've talked a little bit about your funding. Could you say a little bit more about the primary sources of funds?
Yeah. Yeah. So the primary sources of our funds come from our sweat equity as consultants. I did this work. I'm a midwife, so I did a lot of this work on reproductive justice, provided a lot of trainings. I used to work at UNC many moons ago, worked in Sanford, doing my own research and was able to create some trainings and programs. We have one of our colleagues is our director of organizing, Stephanie Terry. She runs another nonprofit called Web Squared for Black and Brown businesses in Chatham. Michelle also in health equity and ag equity. So that's pretty much the biggest source of our funding or contracts that we get with organizations, from workshops to lunch and learns to consulting services. We do get funding. Oak Foundation is one of our funders. Triangle Community Foundation is one of our funders, but primarily our donations too. Right outside of our contracts, it's our individual donations. And when you look at trends, historically that are funding, when you look nationally at who's holding up nonprofits, it's the individual donor. I mean, by like 70-something%. Yeah.
I want to thank you for the work
me,
you're
80.
doing thank you for the work you're doing in a challenging environment. I was wondering, like, if you work much with youth groups or with young people, do you see a difference across generations in how people are taking to this philosophy?
Yes. And you know what I realize and recognize? Our younger generations hate it when we talk about different generations. I cannot say Gen Z. I can't say any. They hate it. They hate it. Yeah, we actually do a lot of work. There's Chatham Health Alliance, and they have created a program. Chatham Health Alliance is responsible for doing the community needs assessment in Chatham County, the health assessment. So we work with them on a program called Youth Voices of Chatham, where it's about, we're basically building community organizers and youth, and we provide them with leadership development. I am there as a role to make sure that this remains youth-led, much like I do my work on being community-led. So ensuring that the youth actually have a voice in their vision, their mission, and their strategic plan and their values. We have them come in, we can help them do certain things. So they're building a program there to do some civic engagement and service. We do a lot of work with the Hispanic Liaison Youth Group as well. And we just have kids that love to come out and volunteer and just be a part of it. So, yeah, that's exciting. Now, with this new law, if, in school, I've been asked to come and speak to school. There's a new law now that you can't survey children in school, so I can't say, how many of y'all have, you can't do that at all. Like that's a big, huge no-no. So, yeah, it's been challenging. Please.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I do not want to cut you off. I just wanted to add to the youth question. If you come and join us at one of our workshops, you will see that we focus also on the cycle of socialization and how everything is taught, bias, stereotypes, every single thing that we become is influenced by our environments, whether it's said out loud or whether we are seeing it because of how something is rewarded or punished. And so what we see with kids is that there's a level of openness when you are working with youth. And if you are in an environment where things around race, equity, diversity, and inclusion are punished, you will learn that those are not things that you should talk about or engage in. So it's really, really critical to our work to be able to have open and honest conversations with youth to maintain that openness, because otherwise it will, I'm not going to say revert because things are not exactly perfect now, right? But it will definitely impact the continued openness of our youth. And you can see it happening when children are isolated and not allowed to engage with people with different perspectives. You can visibly see it whether a child is 5 years old or 12 years old.
Yeah, my husband and I are new here, and we come from New York City. And there are two things. One has to do with what you're saying the law is beginning to do here. That's just statewide, correct?
Yes.
So voting is essential.
Yes.
Thank you. The other thing is, I've volunteered a lot with criminal justice.
Mhm.
And I've been looking for the organizations here. I'm in Chapel Hill now. I will be in Durham in a year and a half. The organizations that are truly working with criminal justice, because that's something that I feel very strongly about.
Emancipate NC, if you're not familiar with them, they do a lot of work on the criminal justice system, the penal system. Benevolent Farms is out in Alamance County. That's a really cool one. That is they provide workspace and lodging for previously incarcerated women of color. And then oh, I just met this dynamic person, and you're gonna have to, sorry, it's Sunday evening, afternoon. I'll find some more and send them also. Can you write that? Yeah, absolutely. But Emancipate NC is NC, yeah.
If you're ready for the next question, I just noticed this model resembles a lot what was in the community action program of the War on Poverty. You don't hear about that part a lot, but they were organizing communities, and that was a lot of reaction from Democrats. And then when Nixon got elected, he had withdrawal from the poverty, and two unknown people there, Cheney and Rumsfeld, were charged of withdrawing from the War on Poverty.
Right, right. Yeah, it's funny, even working with Industrial Areas Foundation, IAF, what we find with community organizing principles, even though they may be relational organizing, they don't always hold a racial equity analysis. And that's a challenge. And what we find, especially when you're organizing, we didn't talk about this, but when we are going out and I'm having a meeting with you and I'm talking to you, I'm getting to know you, I'm actually trying to discover what your self-interest is. And I'm sharing what my self-interest is, because down to it, I still need a job. So I'm doing this for a job, right? That's keep my kids in school and to do this, right? I still believe in the power of community, but sometimes when we talk about power and privilege, where some of our white organizers, I'm asking them to be very mindful of how they're showing up in people of color communities, talking about self-interest, because it can be a teetering conversation. You have to be very mindful of how you're showing up in those spaces and those conversations. And I love it. We love coming to do things like this. We love coming to do workshops. Much like what Michelle was saying, you've hired us to come or you've invited us to come, but it's not just about us as experts. It's about us being part of a learning organization so that we're learning from you. I just took a picture and, we were talking about this earlier. I'm like, this humanist, this whole idea, everything we believe that personal inquiry, responsibility, and accountability. So often we forget about that part of accountability, and accountability for us is the measurable outcome for equity. That's how we can actually see, hey, who's holding that person accountable? And for us, we believe it's community.
Okay, we're short on time. One more question.
So folks my age, in their 80s, grew up with an organization called CORE.
I know.
We want to know about Whitney Young, and has he been talking to you recently?
Or too. So somebody else asked me that, and she's like, well, I'm old. I'm like, well, I guess I'm over there too. Yeah, no, Congress, racial equality. Yeah. And then things kind of went a little sour for CORE there for a minute too. Yeah, this actually just happened to be the name that they chose. In 2016, it was actually a group of faith leaders and individual community members who came together to talk about the increased media attention to police brutality of brown bodies. And then they were like, gosh, what do we do? We should what was really hopeful and inspiring is that they recognized the need for continued conversation, and they weren't ignorant to think that it wasn't going to happen in Chatham County, or to believe it couldn't happen in Chatham County. They recognized that, wow, this is an issue and this could happen here. So through those conversations, we actually just started as an education organization. We hosted Racial Equity Institute, and we had them come in and do some work. And we actually intentionally invited educators and folks of the criminal justice system and our police officers, our sheriffs. And we grew from there, right? And so when they decided what are we going to be called, it became, we're community organizing for racial equity. And then I came along, I was like, well, there was a CORE before. But whatever. Nationwide. Yeah. Thank you.
And do we have any announcements? Yes.
All right, so just a reminder, our Change for Change organization this quarter is the North Carolina Community Bail Fund of Durham. You had asked about some opportunities there. So we do have the North Carolina Community Bail Fund. They post low income bail for people who could not otherwise afford it, because we do have people who sit in jail because they are poor. So that's an organization that we're supporting. The other thing is I want people on the 24th of March, we are participating in the crop walk. That is part of our ethical action this quarter. So please, I will do my best to, and thank you, Chris, for sending out a link through the listserv. I will do that again. So just to remind people, and please donate, and we will partake in that on the 24th. There will also be a group meeting here for those who cannot walk, but please support us while we're doing that. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Yes.
I don't have the exact date in front of me, but in May and in June, we lose an extra Sunday to Porch. And so that Sunday that we're losing to Porch, which is either the 19th or the 26th, we're going to be able to do another Rise event. And we've gotten notification from Sunday Assembly and from Triangle Free Thought that they want to participate again, as we did in 2020, like 2 weeks before the pandemic hit. And I'm also going to try to reach out to one of the meetup groups, which is Women Without Religion in the Triangle, because they wouldn't agree to post for us, but I thought I'd ask them if they want to participate in this, and maybe that'll get us a little bit further along with them.
Okay, if there are no more announcements, it's time for closing words.
Okay, this time we've got closing words from Forbes magazine, a writer named Janice Gassman Assar. She's an African-American woman. Well, I should say Black. Not everyone who is Black is African-American, right? Anyhow, she's in business. And she says, the advent of social media has increased our interconnectedness, allowing us to gain a deeper appreciation of other people's experiences. Each of us has the power to create changes that can reverberate beyond our spheres of influence. What are some of the things that we can do to deconstruct oppressive systems and amplify the voices of the marginalized? Number one, speak up. If you hear your friends or family making off-color jokes, let them know that what they said was not appropriate. Speaking up when you witness prejudiced behavior from those closest to you can be can be an instrumental catalyst to changing behavior. Number two, share your resources. Each of us has resources and opportunities we can share to help others. Share your resources and your network by introducing someone outside of your network to your coworkers and colleagues. This can be a powerful way to deconstruct oppressive systems. Number three, amplification. Each of us can amplify the voices of the marginalized through a number of different methods. When you read a story from someone who is of a different background than you, reshare, repost, or like that story. Number four, show your support. One of the best ways to impact oppressive systems is by providing those in marginalized communities with your tangible support. This could be monetary or could involve your time.
Okay, thanks, Linda. I'd also like to thank Jan for being the greeter, Gretchen. Looks like we have wonderful refreshments from Gretchen again. Chris, thanks for doing the Zoom, and I didn't see who took the signs out this time, but thanks whoever did it. Yeah, okay. Well, our meeting's over, but our community continues, so enjoy the refreshments, and thanks again.